Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AAIM Employers Association. Welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, bringing you practical, timely, and accurate insight so that you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, November 10th, episode 205. Today, how will businesses be affected based on what we do know from the midterm election results? What do the major layoffs at Meta, Twitter, and Lyft signal to us about the economy and our workplaces? And finally, no one dies today. Special guest Dave Sanderson was on the plane that crashed into the Hudson River, best known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Dave and others stepped up instantly to lead an emergency mission. He joins us and shares the two resources all great leaders have. We want to hear from you, so speak up, take the poll, and ask your questions now. All this and more on This Week at Work.
Good morning, Burt Garland. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Phil. It's a great day. The sun came up again. Our democracy, if you're on one side, our democracy did not end. And if you're on the other side, a red tsunami turned into more like a red puddle.
Yeah, that was, I think, quite a turnaround. And one thing I've kind of gotten used to with politics is I'm not sure these polls tell us a lot about what the results are going to be, but I can't wait to get some of your insight on that. I'm sure you'll be covering it on Lawyer on the Clock on your segment here coming up. So I'd like to get some insight from you on that. And I know what you like to call our National Day of Unity. And I believe you're going to introduce a new phrase to us here in Missouri, which I can't wait to hear about as well. Let's introduce the poll question today. As we've all been talking about for the last week or so, we are excited to have Dave Sanderson on the program. So that is going to be a great story. And in addition, covering the news that's already happened or is expected to happen, Dave is going to help us prepare for the unexpected. So in honor of our guest, we want to get to the poll question. And the poll question is, how confident are you in your ability to lead during a crisis? I think about all the leaders I know. I've had some great leaders, and man, when it's a crisis, I'm not sure they're the people I want to follow. And sometimes that little quiet person off to the side that you don't really think is going to step up has surprised me. So the question is, self-reflection question today. How confident are you to lead during a crisis? What is a crisis is up to you. You get to decide that. We'd love to get your answer as well as your comments. All right, Burt, we're going to keep this show clipping along. I want to get to some of the important things you're going to cover and then also get to Dave. So let's get to Lawyer on the Clock. Are you ready, Burt?
I'm ready to roll, Phil.
All right, Nick, kick us off.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right, Burt, let's go.
Nick, what do I see there on the screen? Is that something you're sharing out with everyone? I'm not quite sure about that, but we'll get to that in a minute. It looks like there's a picture of Phil and I on the way into the program this morning. So, of course, what I want to talk about first is
we are. All right.
Yeah, Phil, how'd Nick get that for us? I don't know. We'll get to that in a minute. So, the first thing I, of course, want to talk about today is the elections that took place this past Tuesday. And it appears that voters want more of the same, more of what's been going on for the last 2 years. Neither side really had a great day. I would say that the Republicans probably had a worse day given their expectations. As it sits right now, the Senate is 48 Democrats, 49 Republicans, with 3 races still in play. The House is at 184 Democrats, 207 Republicans, with 44 seats in play. So let's chat about what that really means. In order to win a majority, each party right now needs to win 2 seats, because if the Democrats hold on to the 2 remaining seats, then they and they have the tiebreaker with Kamala Harris, then they will have 50 seats plus 1. So they'll really have 51 votes to the Republicans' 50. If the Republicans win 2 more seats, they will have 51 votes to the Democrats' 49, and even adding Kamala in there, that's 51 to 50. So the
Okay.
last, there
So
are
it's the
3
best
seats.
2 out of 3 if we wrap it up now. We got 3 states left, the best 2 out of 3.
Yep. On
All
the
right.
other side, Republicans, like I said, have won 206 House seats, and they hold leads in 14 more compared to 183 wins for the Democrats, who are leading in 32 contests. At least 218 are needed to claim a majority. So if the Republicans, with the 206 that they have won, if they win 12 more, that gets them to 218, and they're leading in 14 more. So it is still looking like the House is going to end up in Republican control. Interestingly, this may not make too much of a difference, because it really does come down to the Senate and the filibuster for Biden getting more of his agenda through. And unless the Democrats, remember, it only takes 50 votes or 51 votes, a majority of the Senate, to get rid of the filibuster. And with Manchin and Sinema still in the Senate, it does not appear that there's going to be enough Democrat votes to eliminate the filibuster. And so Biden's agenda is likely to sort of continue as it has been, where we expect to see a lot of things going on through the administrative agencies, the EEOC, the Department of Labor, and the National Labor Relations Board, that we expect to see them continue to advance his agenda through rulemaking versus legislation.
All right, Bert, let's move on. And can you talk about this photo behind me? What's this right to weed, your new phrase?
All right, we're trying to get everyone to go out there and coin a new phrase for us so that we could say it started on This Week at Work. And that is, we've all heard of right to work states. Well, Missouri is not a right to work state. There was an effort to get that through. It did pass, and then it got overridden. So we are no longer a right to work state. We were just briefly. But now Missouri proudly is a right to weed state. And what does this mean? So we passed Amendment 3, which revised and amended the existing provisions regarding the legalization of marijuana for medical purposes, and allows individuals aged 21 or older to legally possess, purchase, consume, and cultivate marijuana recreationally. Very importantly for all the employers out there, this new law takes effect on December 8, 2022. You'll remember 4 years ago, nearly 2/3 of the state voted to legalize medical marijuana. And while it didn't pass by 2/3 this time, recreational marijuana did pass by, I think, about 150, 200,000 votes. So fairly significant. So Amendment 3, that means that it does not prevent employers from enforcing their drug and alcohol-free workplace policies, nor does it require employers to permit employees to be under the influence of marijuana while at work.
1 minute, Bert.
Amendment 3 would not prevent employers from continuing to test for marijuana impairment under certain circumstances, and employers are not subject to any liability for disciplining or discharging an employee for working or attempting to work while under the influence of marijuana. Phil, we could see the obvious problem here is in that without any reliable tests for determining what constitutes under the influence or under the impairment of marijuana while at work, it comes back to these indicia of impairment that we really need to have our workforce, our managers and supervisors trained on, so that they can spot those indicators of impairment, then go out and have people tested to see if they're actually impaired at work. There are a couple of modifications to the medical marijuana provisions that offer a little bit more protection for people who possess a medical marijuana card. I'm not going to get into the details of all of that right now, but just keep in mind that there are those additional protections, and we can probably cover that in the run up to December 8th.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a feeling we will talk more about that. I want to remind all of our listeners, our members, your clients, that we do have resources to help you with identifying impairment in the workplace. We know how important that is to the safety of your employees and the community at large. So with that, you can check out those resources. They're available online for your supervisors. They're available online for your employees. And they are part of what you get with your membership. We'd love to make those available to you. Just check those out. Let's get our supervisors prepared to do their job so we can teach them the right ways to identify impairment. It can be very difficult, and let's arm them with the tools they need.
That's right. And Phil, I just want to again stress that it's really those indicia of impairment that you all as employers can rely upon when making decisions related to employees who appear to be impaired by marijuana at work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Bert, great job with that update. Like I said, we will be talking more about that in the weeks to come. Let's get on with our program here, and we are going to move next to the section called Filbert's Forum. We got some good stuff to talk about.
You've just entered Filbert's Forum, where we peel the onion back and take a lighter look at the workplace.
All right, so since we're going to be talking with Dave here in just a minute, Bert and I have put together some stats of just how dangerous are some things. So let's just talk about a few of these here, Bert, and Filbert's Forum. So I look at this and I'm like, to be injured on a toilet, your odds are 1 in 10,000. Not quite as good as the odds to win that Powerball the other day, but 1 in 10,000 to be injured on the toilet. If you're going to be audited by the IRS, it's 1 in 160,000. Bert, any of these numbers look interesting to you?
Yeah, they're all interesting, Phil. I have to say I was a little disappointed to see you show up to work today because I know you had your lottery tickets in hand, and you had said that if you won this lottery, not to expect you on the program on Thursday. So I guess you were not the one lucky guy or woman out in California who won the nearly $2 billion lottery.
No, I obviously was not. I did buy my tickets. I took a trip back to my childhood playground in central Illinois, where I would spend the summers living with an uncle. And I went into a small gas station in the town. It only has one gas station. And I bought a lottery ticket there thinking, this would be the story versus, right here in the city where everyone's buying lottery tickets. Guy travels back, 60 miles to central Illinois to buy his lottery tickets, hoping that he win. And I held on to that ticket thinking I was going to win. But sure enough, I didn't have a single number, Bert, not one.
Well, Phil, I appreciate you reminiscing about your very, very exciting and interesting childhood with your uncle in central Illinois. I actually am more fascinated, about some of these statistics here about, being struck by lightning is 1 in 114,000, getting killed by fireworks, 1 in 340,000, dying in an airplane crash, pretty topical for Dave's talk coming up in a little bit, 1 in 205,000. But then it really gets interesting. Getting killed by a vending machine is 1 in 112 million. And when you start comparing that to the odds of winning this lottery, it was 1 in 292.2 million. So winning this lottery was even twice as rare, more than twice as rare as getting killed by a vending machine.
Yeah, those vending machines are brutal. You got to be careful with those. I also like the being killed by a bear in Yellowstone, 1 in 2.7 million. And the shark attack is 1 in 3.75 million. There's no chance of that. It's absolutely statistically impossible for my wife to be killed by a shark because she will not get past her toes in the water when she is visiting the ocean. Now, I want to correct one number here because we had the airplane crash 1 in 200-something thousand. But if you look at commercial airline, according to the National Transportation Safety Board, it's actually 1 in 29 million. Chances are for that. And I think this leads us perfectly to our guest, Dave Sanderson. For everyone who is listening today, and I want to welcome all of Dave's listeners who he invited across the U.S. and Canada to be a part of the program. Dave has an absolute amazing story to tell. We're aware of the miracle on the Hudson, and Dave survived that airplane crash. He was one in the 290, better than the odds, one of the 29 million. And I want to point out, it's kind of hard to see, but this is Dave right here in this live picture right here that was taken as the plane was sinking. And he was the very last passenger to get off of the aircraft. And Dave has a phenomenal story to tell about being prepared for a crisis, which stimulated our poll question today. So Nick, if we can take a look at the poll question, and then we're going to get introduced to Dave and hear his amazing story. All right, so there we have it. Most people, Dave, this will set you up, feel that they're moderately confident about their ability to lead during a crisis. And I think that's probably what I would say, because it would all depend on the crisis. If it's a bear attack, I'm running, right? If I'm on an airplane, I'm probably screaming and crying, maybe doing some praying in that moment. But that tells you about what our listening audience believes their preparation for a crisis is. Dave, just first of all, good morning. Welcome to the program, and take us back to that day, that moment. Tell us a little bit, refresh our memories, and then tell us what your journey's been about since then.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you, Bert, for having me today. I'm honored to be here with you. And that day, January 15, 2009, it was an ordinary day, and I was working in a distribution center up in Brooklyn, New York. And we began our day at 5 a.m. because distribution centers are open very early because of the trucks and things that have to get moving. So we got done about 10 o'clock that morning, and I was at the end of a 3-day business trip, so I wanted to get home. So that's why I called the travel agent working with her, and she put me on flight 1549. Gave up a first-class seat at 5 o'clock for seat 15A. Nothing extraordinary. The plane was delayed, but that's nothing extraordinary about LaGuardia. If you've ever been to LaGuardia before, excuse me for a second. So, sorry about that. I'll get this turned off. You've never been out in LaGuardia before. There's nothing unusual about that, right? It's people are delayed all the time. And I was one of the first set of passengers to board the plane. So I didn't pay attention to the flight attendants. I didn't know where the exits were. I did not read that little brochure. But I guarantee you every time now I get on a plane, I do, because now I know how important it is to be aware on a plane. And nothing unusual about the takeoff. And about 60 seconds after we took off, it's when I heard an explosion. Never heard anything like that on a plane before, so it got my attention. I looked out the window and I saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing. So there's something had happened, but I flew so often and still fly often is that planes lose engines. It really didn't startle me too much. Because as we started banking, and if you've ever been out of LaGuardia, basically the flight pattern is you go north and start banking to go where you're going. And if we start banking, I thought we were just going back to the airport. But as we were banking, I looked out the window, I saw the skyline of Manhattan very close. So I'm like, I've never seen that before. And I looked out the window a little further, I saw the George Washington Bridge. I've never seen that before. And as soon as we started approaching the bridge, when I heard the only words I heard the entire time on this plane, when the captain said, "This is your captain, brace for impact." And I knew at that point something was pretty serious. Because we only cleared the bridge. The bridge is about 600 feet up. The plane was about 1,000 feet and descending at that point. So we only cleared the George Washington Bridge by roughly 400 feet. So we were very close to the bridge. But as we crossed the bridge, I just said a prayer and, put my head down. And because about 60 seconds after that, so we crashed into the river. And it was a hard hit. I went back to my seat and up in my seat. I didn't think we were going to survive the crash. But when it did, I looked up and saw lights. So I knew I had a shot. But as you see in that picture, Phil, right, the plane was sinking in water because water was coming in very quickly because when the plane hit the back, basically opened up, water started rushing in. And where I was, it was about anywhere from ankle to knee deep. And my game plan was get to the aisle, get up and get out. But when I got to the aisle, something happened to change the entire day. And basically, I heard my mom talk to me. My mom had passed away in 1997, but there's something when she was telling me when I was a child that I just heard in my head, and it was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And that's the moment I made a decision. Instead of going out, I went back towards the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. And because I grew up in small towns outside of Cincinnati and outside of Winchester, Virginia, I actually grew up, my family's Phil is from Central Illinois. So I always grew up in rural places where people took care of everybody.
Yeah.
Things were moving pretty quick in the back of the plane. And I got behind everybody and I started going up and water's about waist to chest level deep and time to get out. And you see that picture like you just pointed to. I was getting out like everybody else, but then I looked out and you see that picture. People already be on the wing in the boat, so there's no place for me to get out. So that's why I was inside the plane. It's about 7 minutes in 36-degree water, waist deep.
So you're stuck in the plane as people are standing on the wing blocking the door.
That's right. I couldn't get out. But people are being rescued. That's what I tell you. It's an amazing sight. People being rescued. But I was in the plane for about 7 minutes till I had to jump out and swim to the closest boat because I felt the plane shift. And first thing I thought is this thing's going down, man. Get out. And I jumped in and swam, and that's where I got to the closest boat that happened to be into that wing. And fortunately, there was a couple guys who could lift me up and pull me onto the ferry, and that's how I got out of the water.
Yeah. Dave, a question for you.
Sure.
I'm just legitimately curious here. In that moment when you've just been in a plane crash and you are trying to save yourself, trying to save others, do you even feel the water? Was it cold? Did you notice it? I'm curious if your mind and your body just went into a different mode at that point, and whether you even recognized that you were in these freezing temperatures.
Great question, Bert. And no, I didn't. I talked to first responders and military folks about this because what happens is you go into that mode of adrenaline. And you don't feel anything. I didn't feel anything until I got out on the ferry, and then all of a sudden your adrenaline goes away. Just like you see these pictures of these guys fighting fires and women fighting fires, right? All of a sudden they're on the curb and they have nothing left, and the air temperature was 11 degrees, and the water was 36 degrees.
Wow.
So that's when it hit me. But no, I didn't feel anything. I was in go mode.
Yeah. So Dave, I mean, as you tell that story, I just get chills listening to that story. I remember that day in particular when all of this happened. It's an honor to talk to a survivor from that experience. Since then, your life has taken a change of directions, and your mission and purpose has been different. You've authored a couple books. You're a global speaker. You've raised over $14 million for the Red Cross. You focus on leading yourself before you can lead others. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you. I've been very honored to be able to share not only my story, but some of the lessons and how this all came together with many groups. And the Red Cross I'm very close to, because the Red Cross that day, Phil and Bert, they were there, had 3 Red Cross experiences in that 14-hour period from the time the plane got into the water until the time I got home. So I've been on this journey, and there was a moment when everything sort of coalesced for me. I was like, this is my mission. Because I'm going to take you back to 1984, because I had a mentor in 1984. His name was Bill. And he, for 13 years, Bill took me through this, what he learned about the mindset of success. And he learned this back in the early 20s, and he owned 80 movie theaters in North and South Carolina. He was very successful. But then how this all came together was, right before he passed away, he had lung cancer in May of 1997. He gave me these handwritten notes. And one of the things he put on my lap, he said, listen, these are the notes I wrote back in 1929. When I sat down and learned this, I'm passing this on to you, but you got to promise me one thing. He said, do not let it die with you. So this is what really spurred me on this journey, because I made a promise to Bill and I had fulfilled it. So this is my mission, to not only share my story, but share these lessons. And how do you lead yourself first? Because that's a big thing he kept teaching me. And then after that, Tony Robbins, for 13 years, I had a security. He was my mentor. So I always had proximity to people who could give me these insights and distinctions. And it's I think it's my obligation, like all of our obligations, to pass on our wisdom to the next generation.
Dave, is there any one particular lesson that you learned from Bill that you'd like to share today that's important to you?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is there's 2 key things to personal leadership. Is you got to be resourceful and you got to be able to make a decision. And when I was young, I was neither of those, but that played out that day. one of the things I tell people, it's not about the resources that you don't have. It's about how resourceful you are with what you do have. And that day on the plane, we didn't have any resources except your mind. So it all starts with your mindset. And that's what Bill really focused on. So that's probably the one thing I always go back to. I mean, there's many lessons in my book I talk about, but it's about resourcefulness and decision making.
Yeah. Is there, when you think back to that day and, you had to make a decision, and this is when you heard your mother, speak some wisdom to you and your childhood lessons came through. How many people do you think you helped get off of that plane at the expense of you being a little bit fight or flight for your own life and just elbowing people? I'm going to be probably elbowing people out of the way. But how many people do you think you helped along the way, Dave?
Well, I don't know the number, and that's one of the interesting things, Phil, is nobody lost their minds. It was the word I used that night when I was on CBS with Katie Kirk was controlled chaos, where people were moving fast, but no one really lost it. There were a few people that we got behind, and there's some lady went back in the plane and we got her out. But I just think there's on the right side of the plane, one of the things about leadership, Phil and Bert, that was really evident is if you go to look at that picture right there, there's no crew on the right side of the plane. The right side of the plane was managed strictly by passengers that had zero training. And that's how you know how leaders step up in times of crisis. Because the thing about leadership is you don't have to know all of it, but you have to be able to lead people. You have to be able to build rapport quickly and lead people. And that's what leadership's about. It's not about knowing every detail. And that's what that right side of the plane really dictated and showed that day is people stepped up when they had no training whatsoever for a plane crash.
Now, when I was a little boy, you'd fall off your bike. My dad would say, hey, you got to get up and get back on your bike and ride again. And this question is for my daughter, Maria, who's out there listening today. She was excited that you were going to be my guest. She kind of just laughs at Bert and I. She doesn't think we're very talented at all. So she's excited when we have someone that is of more interest than us. And her question for you, Dave, was, do you fly still today? Do you get on airplanes today and fly?
I flew the next day, Maria. I was put back on a plane, but the real challenge, I'll give Maria a little bit of insight. The real challenge came the following week when my company asked me to fly to Michigan for a business meeting, and I just got to do a plane crash. And
that wasn't very sensitive of them, was it?
That was really tough for me, but fortunately, I was on so many TV shows that somebody recognized me, and the captain actually came back, and we had a talk, and he sort of talked me through that, and it was that was sort of a relief that you have to face your fears. And then, as I think we shared before, I went back into the Hudson River last year to swim across from New Jersey to New York to show people how you go back, and you really have to face your fears, and even when it may be challenging, show people that you can face your fears and step up and lead yourself first before you lead others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine both of those things would be very difficult for someone to do. But facing your fears, and we talk about this in leadership and through the programs that we teach all the time, is it's part of leadership. I mean, if a leader ever says, no, I've never been fearful, well, that leader probably hasn't been faced with many scenarios that are tough. I know there's plenty of times when we're making decisions and we're not sure. There's uncertainty involved. That there's consequences to the decision, regardless to what decision you make. And fear is a part of leadership, and overcoming that fear and facing it, being prepared for it, is most difficult to do, but an absolute requirement of leadership.
I agree. And I think that's what COVID really brought out. Is that, COVID wasn't just about COVID. It was about social justice and police and, elections and everything. It stacked on people. So people got very fearful with the uncertainty. So, that's why it's so important to be able to lead yourself first. I'm sorry, Bert.
No, that's good. I think we're right up against the 8:00 hour here, Dave. I want to say thank you so much. One, for all you've done, raising $14 million for the American Red Cross, the mission that you're on to help leaders face their fears and be prepared, and so on. We welcome your listeners to join us again next week as well. But good luck to you, Dave. Continue that mission. We'll remind our listeners for our right to weed state here in Missouri and others. We have that indicia training available for you to help your supervisors and managers identify impairment in the workplace, not just from marijuana, but from other drugs as well. So from Bert, Dave, and I, we wish you well. We'll see you next week. And remember, go out and be good to people.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.